So here we just walk in the, trying to get in as many miles as we can today, getting to spend some time with my son and doing my continuous training, walking, and exercising my free will, at least the little that I have of it. And it gets into the areas that just, I go to sleep watching Mystery Babylon. I've listened to all that, Bill Cooper's educations, and that's what they are. Followed Jordan Maxwell way back in the day. Always looking at potential areas where there's information placed where there otherwise would be no information, and then the boldness of asserting that information only to have it, I'm not going to say refuted, but as the field understands the information, it grows, it evolves. And so when people put Jordan Maxwell down, that's not how I see what his work was. He laid the foundation. And you may put like this sort of juxtaposed positioning of what he said versus what the reality that we're assuming that we know. But even that, what we assume we know. And so we're discussing the, specifically like on Vetted with the host Patrick. He's talking about some cryptic descriptions that the theology professor, someone who's sold out and is making money off of this, once you sell the books, once you're profiting, once you're living a lavish lifestyle, what they try to justify is that they're doing it for an altruistic purpose. You know, they're the ultimate forms of borderlines and malignant narcissists, right? Where they are actually going to invariably be working for a faction that created the problem in the first place. And the faction's being revealed. It's almost like they're going to work for the team that they see losing, but they're too focused on themselves, right? And their own monetary gain, to see that a big part of the process is this is monopoly money. It doesn't exist. And so the animal side's always arguing with the spiritual side, right? So I'm gonna fill you in on what is missing, like the information that is missing that they won't talk about. So the main thing is that Patrick was discussing how asinine it was that Diane Pasulka, in an interview some months ago with Danny Jones, talked about, excuse me, I'm having some allergies or something going on here, how Tim Taylor, her inside, a very cryptic, esoteric, and guarded person who's been at the root of a lot of these issues, working with NASA, again, getting rich off of the situation, which means that he's playable. He's playable on their board, right? The game that they're playing. And he's an entered apprentice, and that's the whole point to this. Is that these things are passed through oral tradition, so they're not, Dan Pasulka was saying that there's no actual information data set that's passed on. And what Patrick completely missed on that episode of Vetted, he's a good host, but overall he doesn't see it, is that we're talking about an education, and that's why Soul, Gary Nolan, and Jacques Vallée and all these other people, they're not even aware of what they're involved in until finally they're shown a symbol. And either they understand the symbol and they understand the education, or they don't. Like either way, you're an entered apprentice. There's people walking out on the street who don't have anything and are living on benefits, and though they may be rare, I am one, that understands more of the esoteric truth and the esoteric concept of what, because I've been under attack, I've been able to backward engineer it, right? And living with the peasants, right? Living as a peasant. And that's the whole point, is that you can have these people who assume themselves as elite. They have all this information, but they have the wrong information. They have the wrong idea of the universe, the quality of the universe, and more so how we're being, when I say we, many of us don't even exist. So think of it like this. If, and this is probably a very crude analogy, but it's one that gets straight to the point. If a woman has an abortion, right, and she gets pregnant for one reason or the other when she's 15, 16 years old, she's more than likely incapable. Not every single female that's 15, of course. Some just gather it up and go to work 80 hours a week, but it's getting more rare, right? And become a mom and maybe even have a few more kids. You know, and they just chalk it up to them starting early or whatever. But we're talking about in the social dynamic of where we live now. And say she ends up having 2 or 3 more abortions. And then she goes on to having a career and doing other things. Well, that's a different timeline, you see. She was impregnated at a certain timeline. She would have had the child. Nature didn't reject the child, but it was done by way of what we would call technology. And it doesn't take too much technology, especially for the crude versions of the crude renditions of carrying out an abortion, right? So there's an intervention that creates another timeline. When you see that type of thing happening, the troubling aspect is that the timelines of those things happening all around the world coincide with one another, right? So this gets into data metrics, cycles, systems, when, you know, full moons, all sorts of things where it's like, even more so, the control mechanism says you can only do it at this time. So when you go into Bohemian Grove and you see them saying midsummer sets us free and all that weird shit, you're not only talking about a 1-year cycle, but a 3-year cycle and a decades-long cycle, but there's specific numeric systems of cycles of repeat, right? And so the area that confuses most people is that this could be identified as a symbol. Like on this channel, when you see the symbol, when you see the dynamics, it seems like, where the hell's this guy going? This is insane. Well, if you haven't followed John Dee or the hieroglyphic, you know, monad, if you haven't looked into the mystic omen and seen how the monad appears over and over again, it's like, what does that mean? Well, could you reduce, like, do you believe in mathematics? Do you believe in mathematical precision? You could say no, but then you drive your car down the street and you're utilizing it. Or you're utilizing some supplementary aspect of mathematics, even in the shoes that you're wearing. It might not be as precise, you know? And the wealthier you are, the more you can afford things that are more tailor-fitted to you, right? We'll just go along with an assumption there, right? So everything can be reduced down to a symbol. And that's why this guy, Tim Taylor, puts these strange images of gods, you know, on, and understands, like, the meanings of them. Because there's a hierarchy of persona or personality that each of us represents. When you say that you're a musician, when you say that you're a comedian, when you say that you are an athlete, well, you're going to be weighed against the celestial heavens in doing so. And you don't even need to verbally speak this. It's your pursuit of. And there is a worthiness aspect. And it leads into a mimetic chain of events where you may have unlocked just the first few steps, you know, in the succession of going toward that celestial body, that cosmic body, right? the luminaries. We're talking about the luminaries and the fact that you could argue about the luminaries' existence as specific personalities or personas, but would you even know if they were speaking to you in the first place when you look at universal harmonics, right? Octave tones, things like that. So localized, we have this electromagnetic, strong, weak nuclear force effect. That is the stretch of a line that you would use as a symbol or a sigil, right? Then you have a dynamic energy subset of direction and thereby color. And then when we look at our human body, we are interpreting that through emotion, energy and motion, right? So what Patrick's missing on Vetted during that episode, it's the 28th of, so it's February 28th, 2024. If you want to reference that, it's on my community posts. What he's missing is the fact that this is an education, and that even if you are educated in this, it doesn't mean you're going to understand it. And your mind can only stretch so far to the understanding of this, to where you're unlocking something that's just within you. In other words, you could teach this in a class. The students could walk away thinking that they're learning it, like, Neoplatonism, Stoicism, Pythagoras teaching his students, but only certain ones would actually be enlightened to the point where they already had a pre-understanding of it, and there was a validation that occurred there in the exposure to the knowledge, but they'd already kind of exposed themselves or been exposed to the knowledge prior to. So you see how this covert operation is working, where that information's blocked, but it's blocked in such an obvious way in society with the symbols and the signs, the eras, the destruction of, Tartarian type empires. This is what Tertullian was suggesting when he talked about the soul fundamentally being Christian, is that it's Christian in the sense of Christ, of Messiah, right? Not the blessed one or the oiled one, or blessed with oil. No religion was involved in it. The dichotomy of the neurolinguistic programming played out through the pantheon, through the Bible, right? Was taking what's already happening within you, the war of your own soul, and how crucial that is. That if one person wins over, then the entire field is exposed to that. And the potential of this evolutionary growth, where people have been retarded, repressed, kept back, that actually exists. Many people don't exist. And so if there was an understanding of this, if people who didn't exist, and that is when I say they don't exist forever. It's like a cryptocurrency code. You can't just drop a hard fork just randomly onto the binary code sequence and say, this is going to be a working algorithm. It either works or it doesn't work. It goes back to gospel of truth, the jars. Some of the jars, Jesus saying some of the jars are made perfect. Other jars are made imperfect. And they're made imperfect on purpose. And they're even more so made to block those who are forever, who are real. So it gets into things like where there is an exclusion and there would be a revolt. And then you start to see people in families who are sabotaging each other, blocking each other at work, colleagues, where they're aware of this. It's an unsaid, very quiet game that's being played, right? Those who exist, those who know that they don't exist, and a power play of those in between, where these malignant, strange entities brought the war to Earth and replicated and replayed it, and are even using people as avatars to carry this quest out. And that is the name of one of these assassins organizations that leads to the Illuminati, was the Quest.